Now, our guest in studio tonight is Nairobi Town Clerk Philip Kisia, and of course we're focusing on disaster management, but we also want to talk about provision of services by our city councils. Thank you so much, Philip, for being with us in studio tonight. A lot of controversy, but before we come to that matter, let's start with disaster management, a critical issue. We've seen disasters occur in Kenya, across the country, and so often we are not ready for them. In terms of the city council, what do you have in place in case of a disaster? And right now, would you say capacity has been built enough to deal with something if it arose?
Well, thank you very much, Julie. The city, and indeed the entire country, I will not say is fully prepared for disaster, but I'll confine myself to what City Council is able to respond to.
Mm-hmm.
City Council responds to about 15 to 20 disasters, mainly fire or accidents, in a week. And our response time has been anything between 3 minutes to a maximum of 15 minutes. The international standards for responding to a fire disaster, I think, is about 9 minutes. So we are comparatively doing fairly well. I would not say that City Hall has capacity, full capacity to deal with disaster, because by now the city should have built at least 10 fire stations.
How many do we have in place?
We have 2. We have one in the city, the CBD, and we have the other one in industrial area. So we actually short of 8.
How many fire engines?
And even then, the 2 do not have adequate fire fighting equipment. We have a total of about 5, which is not very adequate. Now,
that's in both of them?
Yes,
okay.
And even with the intervention from private sector, we are far from getting to where we should be. Now, this financial year, we've set aside about 200 million shillings to renovate the 2 fire stations and buy 6 trucks.
Okay, so a budget's been set aside for
yes.
6 trucks, but you've said we need 10 stations, really,
10 stations,
so it's still an uphill climb. But what do we need to do, and where does the buck stop? You've talked about the City Council. Who else needs to be in place, actually beefing up disaster management and preparedness? Let's talk about Nairobi.
Okay, I mean, for Nairobi, the City Council should actually take responsibility.
So the buck stops with you?
Of course, with me, as usual. But there are certain disasters which really need intervention from the national government. And disaster is not limited to fire. We have road accidents. We now have disaster in ICT. When we have, for example, cholera as a disaster, how prepared are we?
Health.
Yeah, health.
Right.
And you'll remember last year the council spent in the informal areas, we spent in excess of 20 million shillings. That was all budgeted. But we had to step in to stop cholera from killing our people. Okay,
so it's got to be a task that, national government steps in and gives. Now, let's talk about budgets. And of course, there was the issue of the hiking of parking fees that has raised a whole storm. But I would imagine there's the issue of budgets required. Let's talk about how you allocate budgets to sectors like that. How is it decided, and how do we then say this is a critical sector, it's really important, we want to see it actually provided for?
Now, I mean, we've introduced a new budgeting strategy. Our budgeting process is linked to the strategic plan. So every year we look at what is contained in the strategic plan, and then we pick up certain items that we are supposed to deliver in that particular financial year. Now, once the items have been picked, then we cost the items. So, of course, after they have been costed, we determine which ones go to capital expenditure and which ones go to operational expenditure. For the first time in very, very many years, we have set aside 20% of our total revenue into capital projects. That is almost 3 billion shillings that we set aside. And that never used to happen before. I mean, before, the last financial year, with only 10%. 10% of our collections went into capital. The year before, it was less than 10%. Yeah, most of the money was used for operational purposes. So that's why, I mean, you probably would have realized that most of the projects in the council were not being executed, because a huge chunk of what was collected went into our wage bill.
And the issues of graft. Time is so short, so I've got to move so fast. What are your thoughts right now on the mayor having to step down in this situation at the city council in terms of that?
Now, you know, that's a matter before court, and I would not want to comment on an issue that is before court. But I can tell you that at City Hall, we are fighting this disease with all the energies we have. We are the 12th government institution to join hands with CASA. But I can tell you that at City Hall, we are fighting this disease with all the energies we have. We are the 12th government institution to join hands with CASA to fight corruption. So far, in the last 6 months, we've had about 70 people arrested and arraigned in court through this ITP program that we partnered with CASA.
Okay, so this is a commitment you're saying the City Council is behind.
We are fully committed. First of all, I mean, if you look at the institutions that and government, we have 42 ministries. We have over 145 parastatals, and the list is long. But City Hall is the 11th to willingly partner with CASA to fight corruption. So out of more than 300 government agencies, we're number 11.
Okay, finally, and we must end now, but we've got to touch on this issue of the parking fees. And I know that is in court as well, and we need to be careful about how we handle it. Of course, issues have been raised about lack of consultation. Was it reasonable to hike it so high? But I want to focus on service delivery. The City Council has a critical role to play in delivery of services. Parking is one of those services. Would it then be too difficult for people to park in the city? The second question, security. When you do park your car, perhaps you wouldn't mind paying so much if you were sure your lights, your mirrors were going to be safe. Please address those two issues.
Now, again, that's an issue that is before court. I wouldn't want to get into detail, but I think what we need to appreciate is the fact that, you know, it's not, resources are not limited to money. What about minutes? The time you waste driving around trying to look for parking in the city. That is a resource that is being wasted. What about the man hours that you lose going around and hanging in traffic? What about you know, I mean, the loss of business? Any central business district in the world is meant for short-term parking. People get there to come and do business. You have law firms, you have restaurants, you have hotels, and so on and so forth. The CBD is actually meant for business and people. In fact, we should actually attempt to reduce the number of motor vehicles in CBD and encourage pedestrians to walk.
So more walking.
More walking.
Okay, we must talk more about this because, of course, there's the issue of public transport and a whole load of other things. But thank you for joining us. You've heard the views of the Town Clerk, Philip Kisia.